The first time my daughter embarrassed me in public, it wasn't with a tantrum or spilled juice. It was with a question. We were at a black-tie charity dinner, crystal chandeliers throwing diamonds of light across the room, when she took the mic like she owned the place and said, "Mom, when do I get a dad I actually like?" Every fork froze halfway to a plate. Some people chuckled because they didn't know what else to do. Others buried themselves in their phones. I just stood there in my silver gown, heart pounding behind my ribs, trying not to let my face betray the thousand thoughts racing through my head. I could have brushed it off, laughed, and moved on. But I crouched down to her height and told her we'd talk at home. She shook her head and said, "Home doesn't listen like this room does." And she was right, so I turned to that sea of donors and cameras and said, "My daughter just asked a brave question, and I'm not going to punish bravery." I told them about being widowed when she was 6, about how grief doesn't disappear. It just moves into the corners of your life, and about how maybe it was time to let her have a say in who might join our little family someday. I laid out my plan: 4 weeks, a few casual meetings in daylight, no champagne, no scorecards, just honest moments to see how we felt. She'd get a voice, I'd keep the decision. That's what family is: voice and responsibility. And yes, there'd be ice cream involved. She insisted. We ended up with a list of 5 respectable men: a sharp attorney, a heart doctor, a finance wizard, and an architect who designed kind buildings, and a polished hotel owner. All vetted, all successful, all perfectly fine. But the first curveball came at a construction site with the architect. We were touring a new project when the freight elevator groaned, shuddered, and stopped dead between floors. The air went stale. My daughter's little hand tightened on my coat. That's when a calm voice came through the metal names: David. "Maintenance. You're safe." He talked her through, breathing like she was blowing out birthday candles, had her list things. She could touch, sounds she could hear. When the door finally opened, a man in a blue work shirt with a tool belt crouched down so she could step out without fear. She told him he used a nice voice. He said he saved the mean one for broken vacuum cleaners. A week later, she spotted him in our office lobby. "It's the 7 guy," she whispered. He smiled, nodded, and went back to work. But later that morning, during a crisis meeting about a project on the brink of collapse, he glanced at our blueprints and almost offhand gave a fix our overpaid consultants hadn't thought of. Save the job. Save millions. And then he just went back to mopping floors like nothing happened. The polished bachelors didn't like him. I overheard them at a mixer trading jabs about the janitor like he was some social experiment. My daughter cut them off cold. "Mr. David fixes things you don't even see are broken." The silence that followed was better than any applause. I didn't realize then just how much that would stick in my head. One of those men, a slick investor named Rick, started working behind the scenes to push David out to reassign him to another building across town. Said he was too visible here. David took it quietly, told me he didn't want to make my life harder. My daughter was furious. That's like firing the sun because you're mad about the heat. Then right before his transfer, a company file went missing from our server. Guess whose login they blamed? David's. Rick was leading the charge to suspend him for security. But a single offhand comment from David's son gave us a crack in the story. The file had been moved minutes before David ever logged in, by Rick himself. IT logs and the security footage confirmed it. He'd staged the whole thing. I confronted him at a lakeside retreat packed with investors. "You moved it. You moved it back then," cried Wolf, I told him. "You tried to make my daughter's safe person look dangerous." He tried to play it off, said I was letting affection blur my governance. I told him to remember this line the next time he manipulated my staff for personal gain. He'd find himself very far from all of them. By the end of the 4 weeks, I'd been to coffee dates and museum strolls and charity luncheons with the 5 respectable men. And then came the night of decision. Reporters in the back, the board in the front, the bachelors lined up like they were pitching for my hand. Every one of them talked about what they could offer me: money, connections, stability. Not one mentioned what kind of father they'd be to my daughter. So I asked her to speak. She stood up in her little blue dress, smoothed her skirt, and said, "I need someone who makes our family better. Someone who can make pancakes, fix a squeaky door, and tell me when I'm wrong. Someone like Ethan's dad." And she walked straight to the back of the room, took David's hand and brought him to the stage. Rick's voice cut through the whispers. "Is this really the image you want? A CEO choosing a janitor?" I looked right at him. "You're mistaking an image for a life." Then I told that room exactly why I was choosing him, how he'd saved my company, twice treated my daughter with respect, and reminded me what it felt like to trust someone completely. The next morning, the headlines were brutal. The board called it problematic optics. My own mother suggested I quietly back away, but I held a press conference instead. I told the city that David wasn't a janitor because that's all he could be. He was a janitor because he refused to trade his integrity for a quick way back into the corporate world. I said if investors walked over that they weren't the partners we needed. We got married months later under a white tent in my backyard. No chandeliers, no photographers, just family and a few friends. My daughter walked down the aisle with his son. My vows were simple: to protect the home we'd built, not the house, but the people inside it. His was simpler, that I'd never face a storm alone. That night we ended up in the kitchen, in our wedding clothes, sleeves rolled up, making pasta because the catered food had vanished. My daughter looked around at the four of us and grinned. "I think I picked pretty well." And she had. Some people still don't get it. They see a CEO and a janitor and think it's a mismatch. I see a man who can steady a room in a crisis, teach my daughter that kindness is strength, and remind me every day that slow is smart. Now I want to know what you think. Is it foolish to risk status for love and respect? Or is it foolish to think status was ever the point? Tell me in the comments, because I know this story is going to split the room.